Yeah, I just wanted to welcome my friend Bodhi. Uh, it's really part of my intention with Ally Kind is to be exploring this theme or ethos of decentralized spirituality. I'm doing this project and I have so much passion around exploring this practice of ally work. And that word exploring is key for me because it's something that's new for me. I don't feel like I can call myself an expert or a teacher, so I really am resonating with this term of being an explorer. And, in a sense, I felt at points somewhat lonely on this journey. And so it's been sweet for me to be connecting with Bodhi and see resonance is arising in our experience. Like we've been connected professionally for a number of years, and so we've already shared a lot of resonances, and it's been sweet to be exploring this new resonance together. And so I just kind of like there's something kind of neat about looking at this practice as an exploration, and in a sense, like we're both exploring our direct experience. We're generating internal maps, um, markers, um, and I see this conversation as like we're both like getting to share our perspectives and our seeings and our questions around like what is this practice, what is the imaginal, how does it connect to our hearts, our beings, our purposes in life. So yeah, that's just what came up for me in this moment, and just want to thank you also, Bodhi, for just being willing to be on video and speaking about this. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be in conversation with you as always, Barnaby, and pretty exciting to see kind of the stuff that you're into and bringing into the world around this ally work.
I want to touch on something we were just checking in on before we started recording. Um, and I think it's interesting because I guess part of what I see as the potential benefit of this practice of ally work is that it can really help bring us into alignment with, um, what we could call like our deepest heart's desire. And you and I were talking about, for both of us right now, we're almost stepping into um, the unknown in terms of where our lives are headed in kind of like practical or professional terms, but we're both really interested in having our lives like unfold from this alignment with this, with the heart of our being, I guess I would say, and kind of listening for that, being in dialogue with our hearts, and seeing what arises. But I just want to name that and just, I guess, bounce it back to you, and maybe see if you have any reflections around like, yeah, what comes up for you in presencing that aspect.
Uh, I I'm just getting started with the with Jeffrey Raff's work on ally work, or kind of like thinking about it and talking about it in that language and in the language that I know you are exploring. But one of the things that has been interesting to me, you talk about the heart is as I have been exploring the the imaginal realm and the different kind of characters in that realm is the almost like the personalities of the different characters or beings, and so the heart as being one of those personalities. And I'm in transition with my work, and you alluded to that somewhat. And so I was asking questions in my dialoguing over the last weekend to different characters in the imaginal. Like, for example, there was a snake in a dream that I was asking questions to about my work. And then I asked my heart a question. And something that was so interesting is the different personalities that I encountered. And the heart, when I talk to my heart, it's very quite confident in me. It's almost, I'm like, should I do this thing? Should I like kind of take a risk here? And it's like, absolutely. It's like, no one in the world believes in me as much as this character, my heart in the imaginal. It's just unwavering, pure support, and kind of like a little bit, not tough, but just like it just embodies like courage, and almost like, yes, of course you should take a risk. Like, let's go, let's do it. You've got to be bold in order to walk the path that you want to walk. And so that's just so interesting to me compared to some of the other ways that I've done dialoguing in the imaginal realm. And the thing that I just said to you before we were recording is I asked this question about my work to my heart, and before it responded, it was like, you should just know that this is one perspective and you may want to consult others. And then it like gave me a really kind of firm, like, absolutely go take this risk kind of answer. But it's just so cool that that aspect in the imaginal was like, I'm going to have a specific way to offer guidance, and there are other ways, that other places you could go or other people you could talk to for different perspectives.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's thanks for your share. I appreciate that. What you're sharing is like this kind of deep internal conversation you're having, and just thanks for being open enough to share that here. I had some self-talk coming up while you're speaking. I was like, oh man, Bodhi's like has such trust in exploring his own experience in these ways. About like you had mentioned you were in the first few chapters of Jeffrey Raff's book, in which essentially he's creating practices or exercises around dialoguing with different imaginal figures that you internally will just kind of be like, okay, what imaginal figure? And you're saying like the snake from your dream. And I just appreciate your willingness to go there, and it kind of, sometimes I think that like, oh, maybe I'm well suited to sharing the practice of ally work, because in a sense I'm someone who's so doubting, and we've talked about this before, that it's kind of like, if I can have trust in it, then maybe a lot of other people can, because maybe there's like more obstacles or barriers for me growing up in like a kind of like a secular, more scientific minded like family or culture. So yeah, I'm just kind of like reflecting you, but also bringing in what was coming up for me in your share. And I was also maybe even more than that, Bodhi, I was really struck by, struck again by how personal this practice is. And I know for you, as you mentioned, this is still in a really exploratory phase. So I don't even want to say like, oh, Bodhi and I do the same practice, because we're in different stages of familiarization. But at the same time, I can already see a beauty that this practice is so broad that the way each person orients to it is so distinct and reflective of their own being. Like I can already hear in your share, like the way a practice of ally work and an orientation of the imaginal world will just be so particular to you. It'll have like characters and flavors and expressions that are so particular to you. And when I do the practice, it's so particular to me. There's a mentor that I talk to around about the practice of ally work, and she's been sharing some of the flavors that other people she's introduced it to, how their expressions and practices look, and they're very different from mine too. So I'm very kind of struck by, and this I think ties back to the way Raf talks about the Sufi orientation, that each person has their own like face or name of the divine. I've been sharing about Ibn Arabi with people through Ally Kind, and he talks about each person having a private face to the divine. And it's like this private face looks so... I'm really feeling like the uniqueness of that face as I hear you speaking and expressing something that's incredibly personal, and yet I'm also feeling so much resonance and like so much in common at the same time with your sharing. So I hope that wasn't too much, but I'm feeling just a lot of energy in reflection to what you shared.
Yeah, well, that just reminded me of your conversations around decentralized spirituality, right? It's almost like when I think about it, like of course the divine has unique manifestations for all of the unique humans in the world. You know what I mean? Like it's almost, when I think about it and hear some of the things that you talk about, I'm like, oh, of course it's that way. Just makes sense.
And I think that's something that's been important for me in learning about this practice, or some frameworks or maps around it, is it really actually is so deeply respectful of the human being, and the human being as this place for the expression of the divine. It's been a kind of, I'm so, let's say, studied theoretically and practically in mindfulness and meditation, and even, what's known as sort of like non-duality. And those things don't necessarily include this orientation language like the sacred or the divine. And particularly for me, it's been through the ally practice and some of the study, where this idea that I'm going to come back to this quote of Ibn Arabi's, like all of existence is imagination within imagination. And so like this mysterious divine gives birth to existence through its own imagining, through its own act of creation, and then we as humans, being expressions of that, are also endowed with this divine imagination that is then expressing itself in this very unique way. And I just think at a time when, like, I know humans have made a lot of mistakes in the world and they've done some horrible things, but we've almost lost touch with the idea that humans are sacred. And I think it's so powerful it's been really powerful for me to orient to that perspective.
Yeah. One of the other things that is just coming to mind as I am here with you in this conversation is another place I'm exploring is dialoguing with the earth. And you were talking about, you know, the um, the recognition of humans as being sacred. And so in some of my explorations with the natural world, there can be this sense of like, well, to be responsible humans, the best thing we can do is like not touch nature. Like we're separate from it. We need to like leave it alone. And that's the best way to like practice restoring ecosystems. Um, and I'm really interested in something different, which is like recognizing that we are part of nature. Humans are an essential part. And yeah, I mean, what you're talking about as being as a sacredness or a divinity inherent in humans, it just reminds me of that. Like we're an inherent part of this planet, and you know what shifts when we are bringing each of our selves into that kind of relationship with it. Just like what shifts when we each bring our own recognition of our divinity into our lives or experience. Like it's just so different than centralized spirituality, or than this like removing the individual from that which is divine or sacred, whether it's the earth or whether it's um, the divine in a larger sense. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I I love that you're, no pun intended, like grounding our conversation by presencing the earth, nature, and speaking to, yeah, I guess I just, like, if all of this, whether we call it human, whether we call it nature, whether we call it earth, the heart, all of this is like forms of um, forms of the divine through the creative imagination of the divine, and like forms of the divine that also speak. Like humans speaking, the earth speaking, animals speaking, trees speaking. I know you and I are really into tea, like tea speaking. In a sense, it takes this kind of core practice of dialogue that is, foundational in Raf's presentation of ally work, and kind of like extending that idea of dialogue to like this web of interrelationality that we're part of. Like dialogue could come in words, but it could also come through presence or listening or holding, like feeling the ocean, running across my feet.
Barnaby, just a question that's coming to mind for me to ask you is, given what you're talking about around every person having a unique experience with ally work, does that inform how you share the work or how you teach the work? Or it seems like when you're in school and you're like studying mathematics, it's kind of like, all right, here's this thing, here's how you experience it, and then you learn it from someone else. Or even in some spiritual practices, or traditional religions, it's kind of like, here's the understanding, here's the experience, now you have it. But like, it's almost, when I look at your Ally Kind website or watch the videos or hear you talk about it, it's almost like breaks my brain a little bit. It's like, how do you be in community with other people doing this practice if they might have such a different experience of the imaginal or of the ally or of the divine? So I'm just curious, like, how does that inform like your work and your research and your fellowship and stuff?
Thanks for asking. I guess the place I'd start is, I have those questions too, and I guess I'm trying to have the way I engage with those questions be aligned with my heart, in the way we are saying. So for me, this project and this sharing, it just very simply came about because I was introduced to this practice in a workshop with Jeffrey Raff. I'm, as I say, I'm like a kind of a nerd, so I like to research, or I'm pretty familiar with different kinds of spiritualities and practices and mysticisms, but went to this workshop, had a really impactful experience. I'd never heard of this, so I was like, oh wow, if it was really meaningful to me, maybe I can like help be part of sharing access and information about this. And I guess that's still exactly where I am. And I guess in terms of like, I really do think of it more of like, I'm interested to share and to be in conversation. That's the main thing, really. I'm interested to share and to be in conversation. And maybe a really simple like form of that would just be to like have a group of 4 people on a Zoom call, and we would have a check-in, and then maybe just for like 10 minutes per person, we would each share like for 10 minutes, like what's been our experience with the practice of ally work, and then having another 10-20 minutes at the end where we can just each share a reflection on what we're present to now that we've heard each other's experiences. And I put this phrase that came to mind on the website, like, universal essence, individual expression. And I just think I just kind of like the idea of this sort of democratic, equal group share, where we're at a time in the world where there's always been this happening, like people are having conflict and trying to resolve differences and come together, whether it's in families or countries or the whole globe. And I just kind of think it's neat if we can just really listen to each other and both get to see like how different and unique we are, and also how much we have in common, you know? Like we're all combinations of various amazing identities, and when we can also get to witness like the deep identities of each other's hearts and how those get expressed, and find that commonality of love, but also wow, like you're not only not only am I like the same as you, you're also so unique from me. And it kind of like connects to this principle of like Dan Siegel's, which is like integrating the differentiated parts. So it's just coming together in an open space to model that, so to speak.
Yeah, that's just really exciting. I just love it. I am excited for the world to receive whatever you end up offering in that regard, or creating. It just feels really fresh and necessary, and kind of like somehow aligned with all the change that's happening in the world.
Like this conversation is, it's like an experiment. This whole thing is so new for me, and it feels at the edge of my comfort zone to be doing this project, because I was I've been for 6 years professionally. I've been working with peace in schools, doing mindfulness education in high schools. And I did an interview. I ran into a couple at a book reading. They're educators in Portland who we've partnered with, and they're so excited about mindfulness in education, and so brilliant about the way they're bringing it into their school communities. So I was like, oh, I've got to like talk to these people to hear their stories. So I was doing that over the weekend and recorded it. And being in that role of like a mindfulness educator, I was like, oh my, I'm like kind of like an expert at this, I've I have experience in it. I've just have a lot of professional experience. I'll just leave it at that, And I felt the kind of like, it felt nice to feel like I was good at something, or informed about something, or a quote unquote expert at something. And with this ally work, I just feel like such a learner and an explorer. And there's so much that's uncomfortable for me around that. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I doubt myself so often. So just to be in conversation with you, Bodhi, to feel like I'm not like that I'm stepping out of this individual exploration and having it feel more like a group exploration, or something that's bigger than me, which of course it is. It's like it's not limited to the language of ally work. It's just something that's so deeply part of humans, whatever language you want to call it, cross cultures, this intimate relationship with the mystery of being, right? So it's so much bigger than even the way Raf is writing a book about it. So yeah, thank you for, in a sense, like helping me to learn from you as I am in this exploration.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it with the world in the way that you are.
Hopefully, we can do this again.
I would love that.
All right, thanks, brother. I'm gonna stop the recording now.